Hello and welcome to this special interview. This week saw the launch of a report commissioned by the British Council titled Transnational Education in Sri Lanka, Operational and Quality Assurance Landscape, which saw the participation of multi-sectoral stakeholders in the education ecosystem in the country. Now, transnational education offers higher education programs across international borders, and TNE has grown considerably in Sri Lanka, especially over the past decade, with the British Council playing a key role as an enabler. I'm joined by Salvador Lopez Carbajal, Director Education South Asia, British Council. Hello and welcome to Sri Lanka and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Sonali. I'm very glad to be here.
Salvador, the role of the British Council in Sri Lanka has evolved over the decades. It is a significant enabler in the TNE ecosystem with core areas of focus in arts and culture, English and education. To set the stage, could you take us through this journey?
Of course, of course. So the British Council has been in Sri Lanka for the last 75 years, right? So we have a long history of working here. And the main purpose of the British Council is to create bridges between the UK and Sri Lanka. So we promote understanding and more collaboration between people in both countries. As you rightly said, we work in those three areas. At the moment, most of the people know us because of our work in English, whether that is an exam or whether that is learning English from our centers that we have in various places around the country. However, we also work in other areas. So for example, in English, we also teach and support teachers across the country. And we train over 1,000 teachers every year, and we reach over 80,000 teachers across the country through online means. In arts and culture, we often connect people from Sri Lanka to the UK in areas such as architecture, heritage, fashion, film, literature, visual arts, and the creative industries. And one of the particular things that I think it's in a lot of people's imagination in Sri Lanka is our libraries that we have in Kandy, Jaffna, and Colombo, that they have become havens for youngsters to come in and access culture from the UK. And the less known part of our work is in education. And in education, we have two big areas. One is the formal work that we do for schools and technical and vocational and higher education institutions. Also, the non-formal side, where we empower young people to tackle global challenges. In this case, in Sri Lanka, we focused on climate change. It's the key area where we have supported over the last 3 years more than 500 projects with young people to tackle climate change in a number of areas across the country. Now, the reason I'm here in Sri Lanka this week is precisely because of the formal side of our work in education, where specifically in higher education, what we're trying to do is to support more mobility of students of Sri Lanka to the UK and students from the UK to Sri Lanka, as well as something that we, now it's getting more traction as, and it's called transnational education, which is prevalent in Sri Lanka. Safe to say, one of the few things when you get out of the airport and you come into Colombo and you start looking in the streets is the names of UK universities everywhere, and anyone that is around Colombo in a tuk-tuk would recognize those names. So over the last few years, as you've rightly said, it has mushroomed, it has grown a lot. And we're trying to facilitate conversations so there is a better ecosystem that works for Sri Lankan students.
Salvador, the report which was launched this week focuses on quality assurance in transnational education. There are various perceptions regarding this aspect. Education is deeply political and socio-economic in nature, and it's important to look at it from an evidence-based point of view. What are some of your takeaways from this report findings?
Yeah, certainly. Let me start by telling you a few statistics. just so you get an idea of how important transnational education is today in Sri Lanka. Every year, there's around close to 500,000 students in higher education in Sri Lanka. But every year, there's around 171,000 students that are eligible to go to higher education, that they can apply and get into an institution. However, public institutions in Sri Lanka can only offer 44,000 seats. If we make the maths, it's around 25%. So 1 in every 4 can get in, and then there's 3 people that don't have access to public institutions. It's quite a gap. Today, we launched the report, and we had Minister Susil Premajayanta, and he was precisely explaining that this is a huge challenge for the Sri Lankan government in order to provide access to all of those 171,000 students that come out every year. And so in terms of access, the role that these institutions from the private sector play to provide that for Sri Lankan students is huge. Again, 3 in every 4. And he was explaining, some people that can afford it go abroad. Some people choose other type of qualifications like technical and vocational. And then the majority of the others then end up going to a private institution, often with that, as I was saying, international partner or an international university. For the UK today, the report, one of the things that came out of it is the UK currently is the largest provider of foreign qualifications in Sri Lanka. We're talking about 54,000 students in Sri Lanka enrolled in UK TNE as of last year. 54. That's more than the 44,000 that are going into public institutions. So you can imagine how, again, I'm just trying to stress the importance of transnational education. And Australia, being the second country that provides foreign qualifications in the country, they provide around 3,000 students enrolled. So overall, 60,000 qualifications is quite big. Now this comes with a challenge. So you rightly put, the finger where it is. One of the key challenges that came out from interviewing not only TNE providers, so transnational education providers, private institutions on the large, but also public universities, students from these institutions, parents, as well as public officials from UGC, the University Grants Commission, from the Ministry of Education, from the non-private higher education, part of the Ministry of Education. One of the key concerns overall is quality assurance for all of those institutions, because currently there is no mechanism that allows the government or the student and the parent to see what type of quality assurance they are following. And therefore, what you trust is that because it's a foreign qualification, it's good. It's been trusted that because it's a UK qualification, the student and the parent says, okay, I'm going to invest in this for my future. However, there are many institutions that often look at the nitty-gritty of how that is delivered, and then it can cause problems of perception, especially. Now, I am not saying, because that was not the scope of the report, that there are good or bad delivery of that. It's just that there is no mechanism to measure. And that is a problem, because the quality assurance systems that we found in some of the case studies that we got and that people can see are actually quite robust. The quality assurance process that are followed are quite robust, but there is no way to evidence that and show it to the public or show it to the government, so the government can say, well, actually, yeah, your standards are good. So that is the key issue right now with quality assurance.
Okay. Salvador, education requires a multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder approach to ensure the most qualitative experience for its beneficiaries, who are its learners and students. What are some of the lessons for policymakers? Because ultimately, from a capitalist point of view, TNE must essentially enhance the employability of young Sri Lankan students.
Definitely, definitely. And again, today in the launch of the report, we were discussing some of these recommendations. So the report puts a stress particularly in actually two key recommendations for public policy. The first one is to create a system, as I was saying, that allows the transparency and the providing that information to the ultimate user. So the ultimate user can actually see and measure and take an informed evidence-based decision. Yeah, so that is one aspect of it. Obviously, that not only includes the government to say this is what's going to happen, but also the providers to contribute with that data. So it's a challenge for the whole ecosystem. On the other side, there is currently a bill being discussed that will be submitted at one point to the parliament. We have elections coming, so we will need to see what happens after the elections, but eventually the ambition of the Sri Lankan government is to create a system that allows for a more cohesive framework for ensuring that quality assurance is there. So it's a more regulated market, and it's a policy that would allow private institutions to be able to commit to certain standards. What those standards will be, there will need to be discussions, there will need to be technical tables, and we were just precisely today discussing that it needs to be inclusive of the private sector voice. It needs to be inclusive of the public universities' voice, which are already being regulated, and it needs to be inclusive of students, and it needs to be inclusive of industry. So that is one of the things that right now there is an ambition to do, but because of the political context that Sri Lanka is going, we will need to see what happens. From the British Council perspective, that is one of our key ambitions. So we generated some research, again, to provide evidence for policymakers as well as TNE providers on where are the gaps and what are the things to focus on and where are the things that could be improved, especially what are the things that could increase. And we hope to keep facilitating this over the next few years.
Fantastic. Could you also share your perspectives on how international collaborations must be strengthened to enhance the effectiveness and reach of transnational education programs?
Yeah, so this is a critical one. I think, at the moment, transnational education is often focused on delivering a teaching degree. So you go, you take a course, you get a piece of paper, you move into a job or applying for a job, period. Right. So it's very transactional in the way that it's, envisioned. If you look at the purpose of a university, say a public university in Sri Lanka or any university in the UK, one of the key focus is beyond teaching, there is research, for example. So, there is impact of the things that are the knowledge that it's being produced by the university. It has an impact in the society to advance a topic or to solve a particular challenge. And then there's another element which goes into the work that universities do with communities. And how can universities have an impact in their communities around them or in the people that are coming into the institutions. So the moment that doesn't exist, again, transnational education has grown in Sri Lanka over the last, especially the last 5 years, incredibly, like a lot. But most of it is focused only in that teaching part. So again, one of the key recommendations, and I also have to say, the majority of these partnerships are with private institutions, not with public state universities in Sri Lanka. So the way we see the recommendations in this regard in the report are twofold. One, to expand the number of state universities that are currently being regulated by the government, that are funded by the government, and that are universities that are already doing research, that are already doing something specifically with the communities, to engage with an international partner. Because the international partner, one of the benefits that we identify from the examples that already exist is they bring interdisciplinarity, they bring alignment to industry, they bring courses and curricula that can be flexibly enough to adapt quickly to the demands of the future, you know, the demands that the industry in the next 10 years will have. So making state universities more agile by connecting to those international partners is one of the big areas for development in this. And the second one is the current partnerships that exist between private institutions in Sri Lanka with UK universities is expanding them to research, or expanding them to community work, or expanding and changing the profile of the teachers, the profile of the researchers, the profile of the students, the geographical spread. Right now, everybody's in Colombo. Very little outside, you know, reaching the island. So for these institutions to look out to Kandy, to go to Jaffna, that is one of the key things to explore.
All right. Salvador, a report is only as good as its findings, and its findings are only as good as its implementation. So as a key player in this ecosystem, what is the way forward for the British Council from an implementation point of view?
Yeah. So just to stress that the British Council is only one of many players in this ecosystem, and we want, of course, play our part. But you know, there is a big onus on what the government needs to do, big onus on what the universities need to do, both state and non-state. There are a lot of technical committees around many of the topics. So what we want to do, our ambition for the next months and years, is to be an enabler. And why the British Council? Again, you know, just giving you the stats of how big UK TNE is in Sri Lanka, it is needed, right, for an agency such as the British Council to play a role. So we are going to be having technical discussions with all of these partners that we are going to be facilitating. We are going to be generating more recommendations for the new government when the elections happen and the dust is settled and the new government is in place. We're going to be able to meet and say, hey, multi-stakeholder engagement suggests that these are some of the ways forward. We are committing also funds from the British Council to support some of these initiatives. And one of them is an event that we're going to be doing in December. Sri Lanka today is a case of success for UK transnational education in the world. Not in South Asia, not in Southeast Asia, in the world. It is currently the second largest country that receives UK qualifications after China. Right. And China, of course, is an outlier. So today, Sri Lanka is hugely successful in this regard, and we want to share that to the world. So we are going to bring in December, and working with partners from Sri Lanka, we're going to host South Asia counterparts from, again, government, industry, higher education institutions, from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, to come to Sri Lanka to experience that success and to learn from the best practices that exist, and to share also what they are doing in many regards. And I'm pretty sure also Sri Lanka will be able to learn something from that.
Okay, fantastic. And finally, if any of our viewers wish to peruse the report, yes, let's tell them how to find it.
Of course. Well, let me give you one. I brought 2 copies.
Thank you.
And for anyone that wants to download it, it's open, it's public. You can go into our website of the British Council Sri Lanka. Also follow the social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're going to be posting this over the next couple of weeks, plenty.
All right, fabulous. Salvador Lopez Carbajal, Director Education South Asia, British Council. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this special interview. Thank you for watching us.